Hey y'all, I'm James Wright and welcome back to the shop. It's time for another glue test. Let's dive in. So if you're new to the channel, one of my things is I test glues up the wazoo. I've done a ton of tests over the years and different applications and different ratios and different types, and there's like 64 different glues, and it's a massively long list. If you'd like to see more information, I'll leave links to those videos down there. But what I'm doing is every year, somewhere around Christmas or New Year's, I have a set of glues that I test. In my garage, I have a ton of these boards that all have these test blocks ready to go. I glued them all up about 4 years ago, and now we're letting them sit. And this is the 4-year mark, and I'm going to be doing this till somewhere around 30 years, I'm guessing. So every now and then we pull them out and see how have they changed over time. What I'm really interested in is some glues do phenomenally well right off the bat. 2P10 super glue is a phenomenal glue, holds incredibly strong, and when you actually look at some of the initial test data, this is one of the best glues out there, incredibly strong. My question was, you know, it's strong right afterwards, but what happens a year, 2 years, 30 years down the line? Is furniture built with that going to last? Or what's the difference between PVA and high glue? Are there big differences on how those change over the years? So I've been wanting to do a long-term test, and that means I've got to let the boards sit. And it's time again for the 4-year mark. So I did a whole nother sequence of tests to see what's changed in the last year. Now this is the first time I didn't do a 6-month mark. So from here on out, I'm going to be doing them once a year until about 30 years, unless I want to extend it out. Then the last few, I might hold off on those ones to do like a 35, 40 year. But I might not be alive then, so we'll see how it goes. But for more information, let me take you over to the computer. We're going to actually dive in on there and show you some of the numbers and show you where you can look up the data if you want to see the raw information yourself. This is the Great Glue Test spreadsheet, and so over here you can see all of the glues that were originally tested. There's a total of 67 different glues that were tested. They were tested long grain to long grain, they were tested long grain to end grain, they were tested gap filling, lots of different tests on here. And if you really want to see more on this, I have a whole video going into all of this data up here. I'm going to leave that alone, otherwise this video gets very, very long. But I've got a bunch of videos on that, and I'll leave links to those down in the description. But if we scroll all the way down here to the bottom, past all of this stuff, then we have the long-term test. So we have the year 0. So when I originally tested 6 months, 1 year, 18 months, 2 years, 30 months, 3 years, and then now finally 4 years. So for every one of these, we're testing the 7 key glues, one representative of each type. With the exception of the high glue, because I wanted to see the difference between homemade hide glue and the store-bought flakes. But we have a Titebond 2, which is the key glue for PVA glues. 2P10 gel, which is a key super glue, West System epoxy, which was the epoxy I was using at the time. I've recently switched over to Total Boat epoxy for most of mine, but I found the two to be very, very similar in strength and capacity. Then we have DAP Wood Weld plastic resin and Elmer's Wood Glue Max. This is another PVA, and it was the best out of all of the PVAs as well. I don't have a polyurethane glue in here because they did horrible. So I generally say don't even try those, because right off the bat they're not very good. But with all that said, let's take a look at what happens. So we can actually slide over here to the side and scroll up a little bit more, and we've got graphs. Look at that. I love pretty looking graphs here. So this one is the yearly average. You can see how most of them have stayed relatively the same. The Elmer's Wood Glue Max has trended down a little bit. The epoxy has kind of gone up and down, and it's a little bit higher than it began, but about the same as the Elmer's Wood Glue Max. The plastic resin, though, has dropped off rather precipitously, so it's one I'm keeping my eye on. Titebond 2 is another PVA just like Elmer's, and you can see it's dropping off just about the same as the Elmer's Wood Glue Max did. Then both hide glues are doing almost the exact same. You can see they actually got a little stronger right off the bat, and then they've kind of plateaued and stayed right about the same all the way along there. But the big surprise, or probably isn't a surprise, is the super glue. You can see how that just drops off here and is now down to almost nothing. So basically, if a glue is over about 150, the glue in most cases is stronger than the wood. And so in most instances, the wood around it will break. So anything over 150 is good. But if it drops below 150 like this, yeah, there's problems there. Then this bottom chart is the adjusted yearly average. I don't put a lot of weight in this. The reason being is the test is designed to test the actual glue itself and not the wood around it. So all of the shear force is put right onto the glue joint. And most of the time I can get the glue to break and actually hold the wood together and test how strong is the glue itself. But in these cases where the white section is actually has colored on there, those are where the wood has broken and the glue didn't get to its full strength before it sheared. So up at the top here, it actually shows you what different colors mean. It's the amount of wood that was left on, how much of the glue sheared as to how much of the wood sheared. So I try to add that in a little bit and kind of guess at how strong the wood would be with the adjusted average. And that's why I say I don't put a lot of stock into that. But I know some people are very interested in it. So I actually come over here and calculate what the breakage for everyone is and then give it a monetary value. And then we can throw it into this chart and kind of see. It tracks very, very closely to this, though there is a lot more variance. They kind of go up and down more because the breakage is different from board to board. So not a huge amount of change, but it is kind of interesting to see how the trends have stayed right about where we expect them to stay. If you want to see all of this raw data, I'll leave links to it down below. But another year done, and I'm looking forward to seeing what the next year holds. It's been kind of interesting to see some of these slowly changing. Some of them seem to be leveling out, and some of them completely dying after long term. It's interesting to see. This is an incredibly good glue for short periods of time, but for longer periods of time, it breaks down relatively quickly. It's kind of brittle in that case. So yeah, we'll see what the future holds. Maybe some of these will start to level out. Maybe some will dive off earlier. It'll be very interesting. If you have any thoughts on this or things that I could do better in the future, please let me know. I am looking at doing another glue test coming up later, actually looking at the differences in clamping pressure between different glues. So if you're interested in that, stay tuned. But I think that'll do it for now. Anytime you do put questions down below, thank you. That helps out the channel. Questions, comments, likes, share, subscribe. You know how it works. Thank you. It really means a lot. It helps us get in front of more people. But if you really want to be amazing, if you want to be a phenomenal person who I personally love, think about joining these people over here. Those are some of the patrons on Patreon, because between patrons and members, you guys are the ones that allow me to do this and actually pay for this test to keep on going. So thank you for that. If you'd like to help out with that, you know what to do, Patreon, or hit the join button down there. I think that'll do it for now. And until next time, have a wonderful day. This long-term study is really trying my patience. You could say it's testing me.